viewers, listeners, welcome to another episode of Blighty Talks Bricks. My guest today, I think it would be fair to say, is very passionate about the property industry. From my dealings with him, and I've dealt with on a number of projects with him over the years, very professional, and also he's got great personal skills. He's just he's a great person to work for and a great person to work with. He's someone I've known for a long time, a lot longer than I want to talk about. He's also following the trait of the people we have on this podcast, in that he's just a lovely human being. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce the Managing Director and shareholder of Fernham Homes, Mr. Sean Ellis. Welcome to Blighty Talks Bricks.
Thank you, Steve. What an introduction.
Well, you paid me quite a lot of money before when we was having a coffee outside. So, no, Sean, I meant every word. Thank you. It's really lovely to see you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks, Steve.
Family
Pleasure
well?
to be here. Yeah, all good, thank you. Yeah, all the boys are good and Karen's good.
Just before we get on to the serious questions, and there's quite a lot of these on these little cards I just want to talk to you, I do have a little present for you.
Right.
So if I could just ask Summer just to pop over. For you, I know there's a lot of listeners. There you go, Sean. Take that, please. Would you like to open that?
Thank you, Steve.
Christmas
I have an idea of what this could
Christmas
be.
has come late. For the listeners that are not actually viewing, Sean's opening a cardboard box and he's just pulled out. If you're driving, just be careful what I'm going to say. He's just pulled out of a box an Arsenal gnome. And the reason that he's got this Arsenal gnome is I've still got a guilt complex. I'm going back a number of years. Sean had a 40th birthday party, which he kindly invited me to. It was an amazing party.
That was a long time ago.
Well, it was a long time ago. I just remember it being an amazing party. I certainly remember getting tucked into a few beers and a couple of glasses of wine. And I remember talking to a couple of members in your team and had heard that they'd clubbed together and they'd bought you some birthday gifts that from the Arsenal shop that included the Arsenal gnome. Yeah. This is where the guilt kicks in. On my way out just before midnight, having had a few sherbets, I saw this garden gnome on the table amongst some other gifts that people had brought along for your party. And I don't know what decided me to do what I did next, but I stole the gnome.
You did?
I took that gnome home with me, and then the next day started this situation of sending you ransom notes from all over the globe. Yeah. I used to sit down with my son Harry. It wasn't many years ago now. Harry and I used to sit there after I'd read the Sunday papers, and we'd cut the initials out and letters out. Yeah. And
proper old school
ransom notes. I used to say, Sean, these guys have got me. They're going to do terrible things to me. Please, Sean, please pay them the £1 million that they want for the return of me. I think a couple of times we took pictures of it on a little Insta camera I had.
Buried in sand, I remember.
Sand, grass. Yeah. I think one time we put string round its leg and hung it from a tree. I got friends of mine I gave them the notes. They would then actually put it on a postcard when they were travelling, and we would send this to you. What I didn't know was that back home for you, it was causing you a few issues with a couple of your mates because you were accusing these mates of nicking your gnome.
Yes.
This situation went on for, I think, about 9 months.
Yeah.
And I always wondered when I was going to actually return this gnome to you. Yeah. And then one day I got a kind invitation from you and Alison to go to a lunch, and we went to the Wolseley. Yeah. So I got the cab into work that morning, and then mid-morning jumped into another cab to the train station, suited and booted. I got some amazing looks walking to the station, and certainly getting on the train with this Arsenal gnome under my arm. Even more so when I got on the underground. And the guys, the restaurant staff in the Wolseley were very shocked when I walked in a little bit earlier and sat this gnome down in one of the chairs and asked if he could have a water while I had a beer. True story. But the shock didn't stop there. The shock then came that Alison walked in And unfortunately, I think you'd had some sort of Cobra meeting at Berkeley that Tony Pidgley had called you into, and you couldn't make the lunch.
Yeah.
Alison, when she walked in, didn't see the gnome sitting opposite me. And when I finally pointed it out, she just fell about laughing. And she told me the trouble you'd been having with some of your mates who you'd accused of nicking this gnome. But what was even more interesting, Alison and I sat there, bottle of wine, couple of drinks with the gnome that we moved off of its chair and sat on the table. You'd be amazed how many people in that restaurant came up and asked us what this Arsenal gnome was doing having lunch in the Wolseley. So I wasn't going to see you that day. So I now had that dilemma of, did I give the gnome to Alison or did I take it back?
Yeah.
And I suppose in some ways the cat was out the bag, or I should say the gnome had escaped the garden, that I thought, actually, I'll take the gnome back. Well, you can imagine getting on the train, the underground, in the rush hour, slightly pickled, carrying a gnome. You can imagine the sights and the stares I was getting from people, just unbelievable. The problems didn't really go away when I actually got back to Hertford, because I jumped into a taxi and got home. And when I got home, this is where the story, I don't think you know the truth of this bit, but as I got out of the taxi, a little bit pickled, my view was the gnome tried to escape. He tried to run away. The truth of the matter was I dropped it and it smashed. I then spent the next 10, 15 minutes with the taxi driver trying to pick this gnome, which was in quite a number of pieces. And we finally got it indoors. I wasn't in the right place that evening to put it together, and I was extremely worried now that I'd ruined your birthday present. I then spent the next day. Super glue doesn't work.
No.
It really doesn't. Not when you're trying to put back together what I was trying to put back together. It was just not going to happen. And then I started sweating, started getting a bit hot under the collar. I'm thinking, how am I going to deal with this? And I had one of those light bulb moments when I thought, this is simple. I'll just ring the Arsenal shop and get another gnome.
Little did you know.
Little did I know. When I phoned the Arsenal shop, I was told by this guy, I think his name was Damien, that they'd had a run on Arsenal gnomes and they were sold out. And they didn't expect to be getting any more back in. This was the days when you couldn't just go to Amazon and get everything.
Yeah.
So I then had this long-term situation with the Arsenal World of Sport at Finsbury Park, where I would ring them every 3 days to say, did they have any gnomes? To be told, no, they didn't. In the end, they finally succumbed, and I got a phone call to say that they had found 2, and they would send them to me. So I said, please don't do that. I will come down there personally tomorrow, and I will pick them up, and I will buy both of them. So I then actually got the gnome. You'll be pleased to know the busted one got put back together in some shape or form.
Right.
That actually sits in my garden as the other gnome. But then I did finally get this gnome back to you. And I just wanted to tell you, I still feel guilty to this day that I actually dropped it. So I just wanted you...
taken it round the world.
It's been everywhere.
Kidnapped it for
9
photographs.
months,
A year. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Steve.
So I have learnt a lesson, and that lesson is whatever you do, don't go nicking garden gnomes, because it'll get you into more trouble than you can ever think. But so I'm glad you got it back. Right. So
he's going to go pride of place.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the serious stuff. One of the questions I like to ask the people that come on to Blighty Talks Bricks is, how did you get into the industry?
Okay, good question. So my dad was a builder. He had a building contracting business, and he worked 7 days a week. So pretty much the only way to get to see my dad was to go to work with him. And that gave me a taste for kind of working on site, working in people's homes. And from there, I thought I wanted to be an architect. So my dad, being fairly resourceful, got me a summer holidays like work placement, working in a local architect's office. After about 2 weeks, I worked out I definitely didn't want to be in the architect's office. I wanted to be the person on the other end of the phone telling the architect what to do. I also realised it took 7 years to get qualified, so that definitely wasn't for me.
7 years, well.
So I left school, wasn't particularly successful at school, went to Erith College, did a BTEC, and while I was doing my BTEC, I had 2 lecturers who said, have you thought about doing A-levels? And I said, in what? And they said, well, it's the same syllabus. You do them in land surveying and building technology. We just need to teach you how to write the papers in the allotted time. So I did that and became the first person in my family to go to what was then Polytechnic.
Yep.
And I did a degree in residential development. It was known as Trent Poly, now Nottingham Trent University.
And was that a challenge for you, because you said you didn't get on great at school? Was that a challenge, or was it interesting for you?
Well, it helped that it was a sandwich degree, so you had to get a job and do a year out as an undergraduate. There was parts of the syllabus that were really easy and other parts that were incredibly hard. It depended which route you'd come from. If you'd done a BTEC, then you understood lots about building technology. But if you had done A-levels, you were probably very good at statistics and structural engineering, because it was all mathematics. So it depended. I found some parts of it really easy and other bits of it really, really hard.
And could you still do the same today, if
Yes.
youngsters can still do the same thing today?
Yeah.
And do you see, maybe not so much where you are now, but back in when you was at Lang and back when you was at Berkeley, did you see those sort of opportunities being offered out, or is that something the industry's cut back on?
I think that some of the larger house builders suspended their graduate training programs, but where I think the future of recruitment into our industry lies, and in many industries, is in being more appealing to school leavers with modern apprenticeships. I think that having an opportunity to come to an employer, work, get paid whilst you're studying, and come away with a qualification, maybe a degree if you've got 5 years to invest, and you come out of that debt-free with the qualification and 5 years experience under your belt. I think if you put those cohorts out of a modern apprenticeship up against a graduate that's been in industry for 2 years, I know where my money would be. It would be with the modern apprenticeship route. And I think that's a much more attractive route for young people to go down, because university's not for everybody.
It's not for everybody, no.
So I think that's something that I think there's a real future in, and I think that would be worthy of a lot more investment.
In terms of so you left uni, you'd got the grades that you wanted. How did you get into Lang? Was that your first job at Lang Homes?
No, my first job was with a company called Berkeley Homes.
Right.
So I actually did my placement with them in Berkeley, London, during my 3rd year, before my penultimate year at university, or Polytechnic as it was then. And then I graduated in 1990 when there was a recession.
Yep.
And I went back to Berkeley, but they'd shut the London office. It was one of the last things that I dealt with before I went back to studying, was delivering all the directors' cars and locking the office up before I went back to Nottingham. So I went to work at Berkeley Homes up in Witham in Essex, started as a graduate trainee, which was a fantastic grounding, because I literally worked in every department.
Who swallowed Berkeley up?
Persimmon.
Right. I went into Persimmon.
So I was there for 2 years doing my training. I think it really helped me that there was a recession, because they weren't replacing people as they left, and there were a few redundancies. And so, it was really a question of being given real work to do rather than just training. And I worked in every team and in every role throughout the business for 2 years. And then I was asked what I wanted to do, and I wanted to go into land.
Why was it? What appealed to you about land over the other things that you'd done?
I think with land you get to work with all the teams within the business, so you need to negotiate. Everybody thinks in land you spend all your time negotiating with the landowners or the planners, but actually a lot of your time is spent negotiating with your colleagues. And I've always enjoyed working with other people and being part of a team, and I really enjoyed that. And I like the variety of different people you met. you deal with landed gentry and scrap dealers all in one day. So it's a very mixed bag, and you have to learn to become almost chameleon-like in the way you adjust your pitch and your tone to suit your audience.
Yep.
And so I had a very old school boss who, was very, very particular about everything. And I learned a lot from him. So I had a fantastic grounding, and the only problem with being a graduate is it's very difficult to sort of lose that title of being the graduate.
Because you started there, so at some point you've got to shake it off, and generally that means moving.
Yeah, albeit, I was working as a land buyer and then a land manager, but, you kind of got given anything and everything, probably because you knew more about the whole business than most people. I really enjoyed it. Bought my first site down in Kent, then I bought a site in southeast London, in Plumstead, and that was when I got a phone call from a headhunter, because I think one of the other bidders at Langs were pretty miffed that somebody else had bought the site.
So they'd come along and bought the site, right?
Yeah, so they said that they'd like to meet me, and that was the beginning of my career at Langs. So
how many years was you at Langs for?
10 years.
Was it really?
10 years to the day, yeah.
Was it really? I didn't know it was that long.
Yeah, fantastic company, amazing training, and what a transformation. When I went there, the logo for the company was poppies and daisies, and the motto was "We care and it shows." And it was very much a affordability-led product, a lot of timber frame, mainly apartments. And during the time I was there, the business transformed, and it was an amazing time to be there, because the business grew. It changed from being a more price-led house builder to a premium house builder. And it was a very interesting time to be with the business.
Would that have been in the days of Paul Healy?
Yeah, Paul Healy and Chris Payne were the joint managing directors.
Absolutely.
In fact, Chris was my MD of the region I was in when I first went there.
Was he? Right, okay.
And then he went on to become he and Paul went on to become the joint
MDs.
UK managing directors.
And then Lang were acquired by TW? Or was it just
George Wimpey
at the time? Right.
Yeah.
Tough to keep up with these names.
Yeah. Well, we're not done with consolidation yet.
No, definitely not. No, definitely not.
So 10 years there, and towards the end of my time, as you quite rightly pointed out, Langs was acquired by George Wimpey, as it was then, and it was around that time that I kind of started to think, well, perhaps I should listen to Tony Pidgley's advances. I always said to him that if the marriage lasted as long as the courtship, I'd be happy, because he was on at me for a very long time to go and work for him. And I wasn't quite clear what Taylor Wimpey or George Wimpey wanted to do with Langs at the time.
Yep.
And I guess all of that kind of change and uncertainty meant that probably it was
the right time for you to move.
Appetite whetted, if you like. And so after 10 years, I moved from Langs over to work for Berkeley Group, and I started off in what was going to be a new division of Berkeley Homes, Berkeley Homes South Thames, and I had a number of people follow me over from Langs, including Alison Dowsett, who you mentioned earlier, who's still with the Berkeley Group today. And that was the start of my journey with the Berkeley Group. I was in my office in Cobham, got a phone call from Tony, can you pop over on a Friday afternoon? After I'd been there a matter of months, I joined in May, and this was in August, and he said, come in, relax, sit down, I'm not going to sack you, which I thought was a good start to the meeting. And
typical Tony.
Yeah, he said, I'd like you to go to St James. And so I moved over to St James, which was the joint venture with Thames Water. And that was a very interesting place to work. Lots of really difficult sites, and a really successful joint venture.
And how many years was it that you kept that position at St James? I know you ended up main board director at Berkeley, and I'll come back to that. But what was your...
Well, I was responsible for St James from about the time I went onto the main board. I became chairman, and followed in Chris Payne's footsteps, because he was chair of St James before me. He went to Berkeley before I did.
Right.
And I stayed with St James pretty much the whole of my career. Just other things were bolted on to my roles and responsibilities. So one day I got called into Tony's office, and he decided it'd be a good idea for me to look after the Kent business because it was on my way home and I knew the patch, or words to that effect. And then, of course, one joint venture led to another. We started working with National Grid back in 2012, and that led to a huge JV that was known as St William, which the Berkeley Group bought out in 2022.
Just going back to Tony, I obviously didn't work nowhere near as closely as you did. I miss him. You know, he was just an amazing character. I mean, it's funny, I had a guy, Matt Fleming, I don't know if you know Matt.
Yeah.
I had Matt on a few episodes back, and Matt made a good point. He said, where do you think he left his crystal ball? Because he saw things that other people didn't see.
Yeah, I think Tony had an expression that if it felt too good to be true, then it probably was. Right. And so when you go on a long run in our industry, which is obviously cyclical,
yep.
Towards the end of a long run, he's getting to think, well, it's got to change. It can't go on forever. And so I think he was very cautious and never forgot the value of having cash in the business. And I think one of his frustrations, oddly enough, was that the business got so big and sat on so much cash that perhaps people didn't really think about cash that often.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people thought, what is he going on about? But actually cash flow, ask me about cash now. We were chatting about this earlier.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
Both of us run weekly, monthly, 3-month cash flows, trying to make sure that we're always looking around the corner to make sure that we can fund the businesses that we both respectively run and own.
Absolutely.
So you miss him. I miss him. Often at work, I'm trying to make a decision, and I think to myself, what would Tony say?
Yeah.
Or what would he do? It taught me a tremendous amount. I thought when I went to Berkeley, I had learnt a lot, and Langs were a fantastic company, brilliant training, but there was so much that I didn't know about until I went to work with the Berkeley Group. The scale of the projects, buying sites unconditionally without planning, some of the technical challenges, creating places, looking at how you can enhance the value of the product with the services and the products that you offer within the homes you're creating. It was a very, very interesting place to work, and I think it provided me with some fantastic opportunities, which, you know, I was in the right place at the right time to grasp those. And I think that sometimes in life people don't always get presented those opportunities, particularly at a time when they're in a place to grasp them.
No, but I do, you know, I think you're right, but I think there's an element that people that are like when we started, like when I started this podcast with you today, you know, your passion for the industry shines through. Mm. The way you go about it is professional. And you got a great way with people. And Tony valued those things. Yeah. They were key to him. You know, and it's interesting. Every time I left Tony's company, it was always with another question mark of what could I do to improve in what I was about. Yeah. But he just left you. I mean, I saw some great situations, you know, a number of sites I went to, and you phoned me and you said things to me, and I think, well, I hadn't even seen that. I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah. He was just... And it's a few years since he's been away from us now, isn't it? Yeah.
It's been a while, but he's still very much in my thoughts. But he made such a indelible mark on my life and my career. You know, I think I owe him a lot for the opportunities that he offered me and for everything he taught me.
Well, he'll certainly be looking up there from some sort of cloud, moving some bricks and stuff around, I'm sure. and I'm sure he'll be smiling that both of us are sitting here talking about him and chatting about the careers that we've both got and have got still to come. Yeah. So your time finished at Berkeley.
Yep.
You're now at Fernham.
Yep.
I would imagine that's a proper culture change in every way.
Well, I think the wonderful thing about Fernham for me was that it was a small business that was established 25 years ago this year. But I was offered the opportunity to buy into it, which was really important to me, to be able to have equity, have an equal share, an equal say in how the business is run with the other three shareholders. And also, I think for me, an opportunity to mould the shape of the business, the culture, create a vision and a set of values and hallmarks of what I think a Fernham home stands for, what the product and the services are that we offer our customers. So it's a very different set of challenges to working in a business the size of Berkeley, which is, a FTSE 100 company. And those challenges are fast and often changing in the way they present themselves.
Moves quickly, doesn't it?
We're a growing business, but I'm really enjoying it. It's just 6 miles from home for me. We've just finished refurbishing a lovely old Georgian building that was a NatWest bank. The shareholders had the vision to buy that and then gave me the responsibility to convert it into new offices. It's a fantastic new home for our business. It's funny you mentioned about Tony. I showed his wife Sarah a photograph of the front of the building, and she said he would have liked that. And I knew he would have done because he loved offices that looked like old houses from the very first offices they had in Weybridge. He always liked an old building as an office.
So you mentioned that you're growing your business.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be fair to say that, well, the government are official that we're in recession. I saw that we were a technical recession 2 days before we came an official recession.
Yeah, that's handy.
That was good to know.
Reassuring.
Very reassuring. That's so comforting to feel someone's at the helm there, leading us into destruction. We have a housing crisis. Mm-hmm. You're growing a business.
Yeah.
We all know how difficult planning is. The guests that I have on that have got the property knowledge and background that you've got. Do you think that we as an industry do the best we do to promote ourselves to the wider general public?
No.
What should we be doing, or what could we be doing that we're not doing to do that? Because I speak to my friends, and when I have conversations, and I know they're all bored to death of me now, but when I speak, they're just not aware of the good that the house building industry does do for the country, for infrastructure. What could we do in the industry differently?
I think we need to think about how we represent ourselves, how we carry the house building brand, as it were. I think that we talked a bit earlier about bringing school leavers into the industry. I think there's more to be done there. Berkeley had a scheme called Building Futures, which was very successful. And I think that there could be more out of that mould. I think, but the whole skill shortage is across the piece. It's not just working in house builders. It's also across, the tradespeople we need and the skilled workmen we need, or women, to the operatives we need on site to deliver the homes that we're trying to so hard to meet that desperate need. I think that starts at grassroots level by going into schools. I've signed up to do some assemblies with schools to try and promote what we do, because I think the part of the problem with our industry is that the bit that people can see is the construction on site, and that's an important part of what we do. But it's just one dimension of what we do. But it's kind of like the tip of the iceberg. There are so many careers and paths that are open to you within a house building business, from the very front end that we've talked about in terms of buying the land. I'm not going to go through all the different careers, but planners, architects, technical managers, engineers, through to those that do the procurement, that actually deliver out on site, and then working in customer service, finance, sales, marketing. There are all these different pathways that you can follow within a house builder.
Absolutely.
But I don't think we do enough to promote what those different opportunities are. Most people look at it, I imagine, and go, well, I don't really want to be out in the open elements every day of the year.
Especially when you're sitting in January and February.
Yeah.
Might be different in July and August.
Yeah. So I think that's part of our problem. And I think it's about how we position ourselves as an industry is the start of the issue in terms of how we can make it more attractive and more accessible. I don't think that the answer lies in solely graduate schemes, as I've already said. I think that's a really important avenue that we need to exploit with young people.
So when I sit here on Blighty Talks Bricks, I gave myself back on the very first episode, excuse me, a magic wand.
Right.
So if I gave you the magic wand and said, look, what 3 things would you do today for the country to get a solution or the start of a solution to deal with the problems we've got with this housing crisis?
Okay. I don't know how many waves. Did I get 3 waves?
You can only have 3, yeah. You
Okay.
can't be too greedy.
Right, okay. I can't make the first wave to get more wishes then. No,
that's Ricky Gervais one.
Okay.
No, you can't do that. No, you're not allowed.
Okay, I'm definitely not Ricky Gervais, Steve. So I would probably start with the planning system. And the first thing I would do is the thinking behind the planning system in my mind is it needs to be bottom up and top down. So, local plans that are fed by neighbourhood plans, great. But currently there's a move afoot to remove housing targets. And I think that is creating a lot of wriggle room for local authorities and the people that are responsible, the councillors that run those local authorities, to avoid meeting the desperate need we have. So I think we should set about reinstating targets. That would be the first part that I would change, housing targets. I think the other part to planning, which is very broken, is the resources. And I think that there needs to be real investment in local authorities, because year on year they've had a tremendous amount of cuts to their budget, so there simply aren't enough planning officers. And why would you go and work in a local authority where you're under tremendous pressure, generally getting abused by members of the public because it's outrageous that people want to build houses near where they live. So I think investing in resources in local planning authorities to get better paid, better qualified planning officers, to give the local authorities the resources to deal with the planning applications that are coming forward, and to provide decent advice. I think, I don't know if I'm on 2 or 3 wishes now, but...
Well, I think you've stretched one into two,
one into
A and a B,
two.
but
Okay.
I said you're great with it. You keep going. You've got 2 more left.
I think that we could do with a little less red tape outside planning. I'm going to see if I can put my teeth in here. The regulatory environment that we operate in is, the burden we have as an industry is enormous. And, we've got so many challenges that we're trying to meet in terms of meeting the new building regs, adapting to net biodiversity gain, introduction of air source heat pumps. I'm sure most of our customers don't know what they are.
No.
Never mind, what they mean for them and whether they're going to be a good thing in running their new home. So I think if I could try and have some way in which we could lessen that burden, particularly on SMEs in the house building industry. I think that there are so many requirements that we have to meet, and there must be a way in which that can be streamlined or simplified, because it seems like just as we've got used to the next round of regulation, a new one is on the horizon, and that is very much the case with the current building regulations. I think the last part is probably around some of the environmental constraints and technical issues that we face at the minute. I don't know why we can't sort out some of the constraints that we currently face. In Kent, large parts of where Fernham operates, large parts of the county are completely sterilised by the fact that we cannot drain most of East Kent at the moment without having some sort of offset as to how we can do that. And that is sterilising large swathes of the county. You compound that with the issues we've got with the planning system. So I think in Kent we've got 13 local authorities. Only 2 have got up-to-date local plans.
Only 2?
Yeah. So when you look at it like that, you think, well, we're meant to have a plan-led system, but that's not working. We've got lots of constraints across the county, and then we've got very few politicians that see it as a priority. And I understand they've got competing priorities, but you know, there should be. I'm probably on to my last wish now. I don't know if I've eking 4 out of 3.
Well, we're going to let you have 4 because
Okay.
I think it's all important.
I
you're
think-
putting it across so well. We'll let you have 4.
I think the last part of my last wave of my magic wand would probably go on trying to make sure that local authorities, the members, the councillors, have an obligation to engage and meet you as the applicant, because so often that doesn't happen, and therefore we don't know what the decision makers are thinking until very late in the process.
When time and money has been spent.
Yeah, and it's incredibly time consuming. The amount of resource that is required to unlock a planning permission today is phenomenal. It really is a large part of why we're not getting enough homes built.
If I'm going to take my wand back now, by the way.
Thank you.
If we know we've got a political challenge, I mean, I think the Conservative government, this particular Conservative government, have been the worst for house building in the UK since probably records begun. What do we do as an industry to actually, why are we not standing outside 10 Downing Street with a placard on a regular basis? Because the one thing that this government does do, rightly or wrongly, it listens to noise. We don't seem to have a united noise. How do we in our industry, we have the HBF, you know, I've said my piece on them, but we need to be a bit more united, don't we, in what we're doing to actually get our argument across.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, Steve, because it is quite fragmented. But fundamentally, as individuals, we get a vote, but as an industry, we don't. So unless voters are lobbying politicians because they want more homes built, it's not going to change. Because house builders don't vote; they don't influence government in the same way that voters do. And so, if you're an MP or a councillor who are running either local government or central government, you're going to listen to your inbox more from your constituents more so than you are from being lobbied by house builders or the HBF or whoever the relevant body is. I think that I read a really interesting stat. You know, when I started in the industry, I think there were over 20,000 SMEs in house building.
Yep.
Delivering nearly 40% of the homes in the UK back then. I think there are now 2,500 SMEs in house building. Really? And I wouldn't be surprised if that number's gone down, because I think that's from a couple of years ago, that stat.
Yeah, I think tough times, I think a lot of the smaller and the middle-sized companies are feeling the pressure. The big boys are as well. Yeah. It is difficult. One of the things that, you know, you've been really eloquent in the way you've put that across.
Or elegant, as Tony would say.
Or elegant. I said, listen, some of the things he said to me at the time. I mean, I get my words mixed up terribly, but he was so funny.
Yeah, he had a regular habit of assassinating the English language. It was quite extraordinary.
Oh, honestly, he always left me as question marks and a smile on my face.
I was going to say something earlier when you said about leaving him with a question mark. He and I used to speak quite a lot on the phone, largely first thing in the morning around 6 a.m.
I was going to say, 5 o'clock.
And when we both got in the car to go to work, and you'd update him on everything, probably for, 10, 15 minutes. And whenever you got to the end of the conversation, he'd always say, anything else? And it always left me feeling like, well, wasn't that enough?
Yeah,
I've told you everything we've been doing.
There's everything I know you know,
on
Tony.
reflection, I probably think that he was just really asking me, is there anything else you want to raise? Not, is that it?
Yeah.
But I guess it was just the way that I interpreted what he was saying at the time.
He's done it again to us, hasn't he? Left us with a smile on his face. Yeah. One of the things I just want to say, because the industry is a great giver to charities, and I was lucky enough to be at one of your gala dinners just recently for a local charity. Do you just want to, because we have got some big numbers listening to this podcast now, do you just want to tell us about the charity that Fernham are involved in?
Yeah, so I guess learning from life at Berkeley, when we set up the Berkeley Foundation there, which has done a tremendous job for multiple causes. What I realised was that for partnerships with charities to be sustainable, I run for the longer term. They need to be local for the most successful partnerships.
Right.
And so we found a charity that's been going for 40 years in the next village to where our office is based, called Spadework. Spadework are a organisation that provide training for people with learning disabilities, adults with learning disabilities, and early onset dementia.
Right.
And they have a garden centre, a cafe, and they grow vegetables. So they have the most amazing pumpkin season where they grow their own pumpkins and local people can go in, mainly children, under torchlight and cut your own pumpkin out the field at their centre. So we started the partnership. It's a 3-year arrangement, and we set a target of raising £10,000 a year for each year. And last year we were just shy of 60,000.
60. Wow.
So that's our local partnership. The other thing that's dear to my heart was that when I'm a trustee of a city farm, a Vauxhall City Farm, which was our partner charity for the office I worked out of at Berkeley at Vauxhall. And when I left Berkeley, when I stepped down, the CEO of the charity immediately asked me if I wanted to become a trustee, and asked me if I'd run the riding school. I said, I know nothing about horses. I've never been on one and I'm allergic to them. She said, you sound perfectly well qualified.
Ideal, yeah, perfect.
You'd be ideal. When can you start? So they're the two charities that I both commit time to and fundraise for. One's in my personal life and the other one's in my professional life, if you like.
Well, again, it just, people listening will just realise what a wonderful thing, just another example of what the house building industry does for the local community. Not lots of that kind of information gets across.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, it's incumbent on us to try and make sure that we let people know about what we're doing.
Absolutely.
So, I think that's a little bit about kind of building that brand and getting that message across, that's part of your values.
Talking about values, it'd be wrong of me not to quickly mention having Frankie. I nicknamed him Frankie, by the way, after Frank McClintock. Right. Having Frankie. What about our football team? How do you think we're doing at the moment?
Oh, I'm loving it. We had a little bit of a blip just before Christmas. I don't know what Mikel put in the suntan lotion when they went to Dubai, but whatever it was, it's working. We couldn't hit a barn door at 5 yards before Christmas.
Talking about great to be part of, talking about a thrilling journey, our time, would you believe, is up. I'm always amazed, Sean, how quickly. It's the quality of this podcast, I say all the time, is about the guests. What I said to you at the start about you is absolutely spot on. I think that would have come across so clearly, your passion, your professionalism. You're just a top human being. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on Blighty Talks Bricks. I'm really looking forward to you taking that home on the train under your arm rather than me. Sean Ellis, thank you very much. Listeners, viewers of Blighty Talks Bricks, and if you've got any garden gnomes, give them a cuddle from me tonight. Sean, all the best with Fernham. Lovely to see you.
Blighty,
Cheers.
You very much for the
Thanks
opportunity.
very much.
Thank you.